it's, the most unfortunate reality is that there are just so few of these guys left, and it's a real treasure to hear their stories. So the guys are going to be showing up here in just a couple minutes, and then we'll get going with the round table.
Here's your album.
Yeah. Are you going to be taking around?
There's a lot of people out here. Yeah, not everybody can get in. I don't think. Sure.
How's it going? Are you guys all set? All set. All right. What's that? You're in it now. Ankle deep, I think. There's no turning back. Where am I hurt now?
That's right.
Try that again.
Everyone smile.
Nice.
Try that again. Before nobody walk into this.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hunter Cheney. I am one of the directors for the Collings Foundation and the American Heritage Museum. Just a quick history of who we are and what we do. The Collings Foundation was established in 1979 as a 501c3 educational nonprofit. The goal, the purpose of the foundation and the museum is, of course, the preservation, restoration, and exhibition of very rare major historical artifacts, as you can kind of see around here, and the organization of living history events and learning moments designed to not only engage people in history, but we want to excite people in history as a means to better understand it and motivation to want to learn more. Here in front of me are three men who served in World War II. They are about to share their memories with you to help keep this history alive. Before they begin, let me bring us all back to the 1930s. Roughly 20 years at the end of World War I, tribalism, imperialism, fascism, and terror had reared its ugly head again. After being voted in as party chairman, Adolf Hitler abolished democracy in Germany and set up a fascist state, espousing a new world order that promoted a Jewish conspiracy theory and denounced internationalism. In Italy, Mussolini's dictatorship quickly aligned with the Nazis, spreading an ideology of blind nationalism, racism, hatred, and imperialism across Europe, east, west, north, and south. Germany's alliance with Russia fell apart at the onset of Operation Barbarossa, where the Russians quickly found that their partnership with Germany was not within their best interests. Brutal nationalism, imperialism, and militarism had seeped into Asia. Japanese Emperor Hirohito and his General Tojo rampaged through China and its Asian and Pacific neighbors, oppressing, enslaving, and killing at every opportunity. In 1940, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed the formal alliance, the Tripartite Pact, and the Axis's murderous power was cemented. A brutal reign of terror, of oppression looked to be unstoppable. On December 7th, 1941, 83 years ago, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. And we knew that the time had come, that we as Americans could not let this continue. The freedom, the liberties, and the pursuits of happiness of people at home and all around the world was in jeopardy. Americans felt this with such conviction that our sons, daughters, brothers, and sisters went off to foreign lands to serve, to resist, to fight, to push back. As a nation, we came together knowing that if we lost, all that our country stands for would be lost. Young men and women from all walks of life gave themselves. They made the ultimate sacrifice so their children, so our children, would not have to endure such horrors and oppressive autocratic governments. On the ground, in the sea and air, our veterans endured dangers beyond belief, day after day, in the most rough conditions imaginable, so that we can continue to enjoy the freedoms that we all cherish today. Remembering World War II is crucial for several reasons, encompassing historical, educational, moral, and social aspects. Understanding the historical context and the events of World War II help us comprehend the profound impact war had on shaping the modern world. It led to significant geopolitical changes, including the emergence of the United States and the Soviet Union as superpowers, the establishment of the United Nations, and the beginning of the Cold War. By studying these events, we gain insights into the origins of contemporary international relations and global political dynamics. Remembering World War II serves as an educational purpose by highlighting the consequences of totalitarian, autocratic regimes, aggressive expansionism, unchecked nationalism, and the dissolvement of democracy. The war demonstrated the catastrophic outcomes of ideological extremisms and the importance of safeguarding democratic values and human rights. By learning about the causes and consequences of the war and knowing the effects and dangers of political leaders who lead through fear, hatred, and lies, future generations can be better equipped to recognize and counteract similar threats, thereby promoting global peace and stability. As children of this generation, it's up to us to keep this history close, to remind ourselves freedom is not free, and democracy in itself is very fragile. Never forget the horrors of war. Never forget what happens when tyrannical leaders divide their people with tribalism, conspiracy, hate, lies, bigotry, dissension. We must remember the lessons taught by World War II, or without a doubt, 100% certainty, it will repeat. We are lucky to have these veterans here today. They risked their lives for us, and it's a great honor to hear their memories. So I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Bill Sewell, Mr. Castor Salemi, and Mr. Joe Picard. So what we'll do is we'll start with Bill and work our way down. If you want to spend about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes each talking about what you're doing during the service, and then if we have time, we'll take some questions from the audience and answer a couple questions. So without further ado, Mr. Bill Sewell.
First of all, I'm not used to this. Really. I don't know if I can go on or not, but I was enlisted in the Army and went overseas and served all over Europe in the Battle of the Bulge and into Germany. And witnessed a concentration camp where the Germans had a labor camp, and I've got pictures right here showing them if anybody wants to see them. And I can't.
Bill, we'll come back to you. Thanks, Bill. Tab?
Well, I tried to enlist in the Navy, but they wouldn't take me. They said I was colorblind, but that was in 1941. But in 1942, they took anybody that could walk. Anyway, thank you all for coming today. I was called by the president to join the Army in January 43. We took a train from New York to Texas on some I can't understand the kind of cars they were. They were just seats out of straw. And I don't know, it took many days to reach Texas, where I trained in Paris, Texas. We were there for almost a year, and then took a troop ship out of California, went down alongside the California coast to where we reached the equator, and then took off across the Pacific Ocean unescorted, and took more than 30 days to see land again. And land we saw was New Guinea. That's the first we saw in 30 days. We did some training there, and we did have some short skirmishes with the Japanese, but they had moved on further north. But then we still trained and then got ready for the invasion of the landing in the Philippines. And we landed on the west coast of Luzon. And I was in the initial landing. We lost most of our equipment when our supply truck sank in a hole coming off the landing craft. So it took 3 days to get new equipment. When we further went on to Manila, when we reached Manila, it was totally destroyed. And then we headed north and chased the Japanese all the way up north and had many battles along the way. But we lost about 10% of our outfit, which is about 20 men out of our battalion, which isn't too severe, considering what some of the other outfits had suffered. But then I had contracted a jungle disease on my feet, and I couldn't walk. So they put me on a hospital ship, sent me home. And on a hospital ship was never meant to ocean use. It was a flat bottom, twin screw, and we hit the aftermath of a typhoon, and I never saw waves to this day that were 40, 50 foot high, And I got so sick, to this day, I won't go on a boat in the ocean. Anyway, I got on a hospital train in California, which is another little experience. I was in the hospital, in the ward, where we heard what to me sounded like an incoming artillery round. And all the guys in the beds alongside me all rolled over and got underneath. It was a jet plane. No one ever heard of a jet plane at that time. But we survived. Got on a hospital train and went to West Virginia to White Sulphur Springs. And then on to home. And by that time, some of the disease I had on my feet had cleared up. And I was welcomed home by family. And I was glad to be home again. Thank you. Keep your hand up, please.
Thank you. Little did I realize 80 years ago that I would be here talking about my experiences in World War II. It's hard to believe that at that time, and I'm talking about 1943, I graduated from high school that year and went into service immediately after. That was the situation at that time. The U.S. started with practically no army, very little in the way of weapons, and yet in a short period, 4 to 5 years, this country brought in 16 million people into the service, men and women, and converted a peacetime economy to a wartime economy, and built all the planes and tanks and trained all these people in that short space of time and conquered Germany, Hitler in particular, and brought liberty to these people abroad. And this past summer, I went to Normandy. I had served in Normandy, came in on Normandy, and back then you came in on the beaches, not necessarily on D-Day. D-Day, of course, was the only way to get in there, and we paid an awful price to do that. But after D-Day, since we had no port on the beaches, we had to come in on the beaches in these small craft, and the sea, the channel, was really rough. In fact, they almost called the invasion off because of that. But they didn't have any choice, because in order to select that date, they had to find the right day to get moonlight, believe it or not. Moonlight, in order to have the paratroopers know just where they were to land. In addition to that, they had to be sure that the sand could withstand, the sand on the beaches, could withstand all this heavy equipment without getting stuck in that sand. All of this was preliminary work. In addition to that, they had people who would remove the weapons that were underwater at that point where people were landing. Everything was measured by D-Day. My outfit was a field artillery outfit. And so we were not a priority. We were heavy artillery, 240 millimeters. Now that was the biggest artillery we had. The shell was as tall as this table, and it weighed 365 pounds. It had a maximum range of 14 miles. So you can imagine how much power you needed to propel this heavy shell that distance. So we came in on D plus 22. That would be the 28th of June. June 6th was D-Day, 22 days after 28th of June. Immediately, our function at that moment was to de-waterproof all of the equipment, vehicles, and everything else, because you knew you were landing in water, and so you had to waterproof all of this stuff before going over. But then once you got there, you had to de-waterproof all of it. And it took us one day to do that once we hit shore, and we went into action immediately. And we participated in 5 different campaigns, which included the Battle of the Bulge and 4 others. And we were glad to serve in that capacity because we provided cover for a lot of our people, for infantrymen, for example. We also would pave the way for the tank corps because they knew what obstacles they were going to be faced with, and they would notify the artillery people to do away with those obstacles before they got there. That was part of the function of the field artillery. We left there after going through all the campaigns when the war ended, left to come home, and they used every ship that they had available. Some of them were not in very good shape. We left Le Havre, France, for Newport News, Virginia. And the sea was rough. The ship was not great. One of the steams let go. And so we had to slow down to 3 knots an hour, which is barely creeping. It took us 12 days to get from Le Havre, France to Newport News, something that should have taken 5 days. Finally, we got to Newport News Christmas Eve, 1944. And I was discharged from the service on New Year's Day, 1946. And that's part of my story. Thank you for listening.
Bill, I have a question for you. You were part of the D-Day landings too, is that correct? What beach did you land on?
Omaha Beach. Omaha Beach.
And what regiment were you in?
734th, 80th Division.
And what was your role in that division?
We were artillery.
You were artillery.
Yeah,
So you were kind of similar to.
yeah, same thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a 155 caliber gun, was the biggest gun over there. Yeah.
Is there anything in particular you remember about that day when you were landing on Omaha Beach?
Well, when we landed, there was so, during D-Day, they had a lot of dead soldiers on the beach. So when we landed, the Corps of,
Corps of Engineers.
no, the Corps that picked up the bodies,
Oh, yeah.
they had removed all the bodies off the beach. They didn't want us to see them. It was a bad morale for us, you know. So we went in and we left the beach. I was a truck driver then, and we were like in the service battery. We serviced the batteries, and we went up the what they call a draw. It's still on Omaha Beach right now. And we got up the top. We made a left-hand turn, went down to the first town of WWII. And going by the hitch road, remember the hitch road? We looked back down. There's a whole fleet of cattle. They were all dead. So evidently the Germans put mines in the field.
They even put mines in the cattle, too, right?
They did, yeah, they did that. But they were all dead, all the cattle were dead. Then we went down to Laval. The Germans had just surrendered that village. So we went right through. We didn't have any problem.
Bill, one thing that is really incredible about particularly the Normandy landings, it was an incredibly orchestrated event. And one of the things that really allowed the Allied forces to advance so quickly was the supply chain that was pushing through France. And I think they called it the Red Ball Express, right? And so you were part of that, right?
No, we were service battery in our outfit, 734. We were the battalion, headquarters, 3 batteries, and service battery. And the service battery would develop all the shells to the artillery. We'd deliver food and water and gasoline. That was our job, the service battery.
That was constantly moving all the time.
I went back of 155 millimeter when we was ready to fire, and we unloaded the shell. The gun went off and we lost my hearing.
So you're a little bit hard of hearing on one side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, we did that all the way across France. You know, we serviced and all that stuff.
Did you also get caught in the Battle of the Bulge?
Yeah. And we went down to the city of Nancy, that was further down in France. And when we were there, all of a sudden, my major came up to me and said, "Would you drive me up to headquarters?" I said, "All right." I drove them all the way up to Metz in France.
Yeah.
And they had a big meeting up there. Eisenhower was there, Pratt was there, and Omaha Bradley.
Did you see him?
Yeah, I saw him.
You saw Pat?
Well, we got to the headquarters. They wouldn't let us go in.
Yeah.
They told us to stay, all the drivers outside.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
They didn't tell us. They didn't tell us a thing. So after we drove back to the camp, Nancy, the major says, "We're going to move as soon as we can." So we drove all the way up to Luxembourg. So after we get to Luxembourg, we went into Belgium, and we did all the fighting up there. We did a lot of fighting. You know, thousands of shells, thousands of them.
Did you cross the Remagen Bridge?
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of bridges, they had the baby bridges there. The engineers would put a bridge over the river in 2 days and would drive right over it.
Wasn't it kind of a scary experience going over these bridges that were made by pontoons and everything?
Well, we went over a pontoon bridge, and as we go along, just like going up and down, you know. And the Germans were up on the hill, firing at them.
They were firing at you while you were trying to cross the bridge?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then from there, we went all the way in through Germany. We got to about 20 miles, I think it was 20 miles of Berlin. And, so, then they discovered this, because it wasn't a concentration, it was a labor camp. I got pictures here of it. And Eisenhower wanted all the troops to go up and see that camp, see what the hell we were fighting for. Because at that time, a lot of these outfits were having R&R, giving them rest period, and they go down to Paris, and they raise hell down there. The troops were. So then he told them, everybody, as many people could see that camp, we're going to see what the hell we were fighting for.
Do you remember where that was?
Orrin, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's in my thing.
We'll have to have a look at some of his pictures after we get through this. That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
These are valuable pictures. I don't want them to go out of my sight and help it. Because I don't think very seldom anybody see these pictures. And it showed what they did to me. You know, the inmates would be walking around, walking skeletons. You know, they were dying all over the place.
Do you remember what work camp that was? Do you remember the name of it?
Orrin, yeah. Well, I can explain it better here. That's my...
When the troops went through the work camps and saw the emaciated prisoners, what was their reaction?
The guys are crying and everything. Some guys are sick, they're really sick. If you want to read this, that's part of the camp.
Would you like me to read it?
You know, would you, I'll break them.
Sure.
If you don't mind, I'll read this real quick. The title is From the Patent Papers, 1940 to 1945. Eisenhower, Bradley, and Patton drove to mine containing the German gold reserve. Walker and Middletown met them. Then all motored to Odruff Nord. So that's the camp that he's talking about. A camp for military and civilian prisoners. Patton's reaction to this prison camp for slave labor, who had been employed in a munitions factory in the vicinity, was pure shock. This was one of the most appalling sights I'd ever seen. One of the former inmates acted as an impresario and showed us first the gallows, where the men were hanged for attempting to escape. The hanging was done with a piece of piano wire, and the man being hanged was not dropped far enough to break his neck, but simply strangled by the piano wire. The wire is so adjusted that after a drop of about 2 feet, the man's toes would just touch the ground, and the death would take some time. 2 prisoners next to be hanged are required to kick the plank from under the person getting hanged. The Imposiero, excuse me, was such a well-fed looking man that I had an idea he may have been one of the executioners. 2 days later, this guy was torn limb from limb by the returning inmates. I'll refrain from reading the rest of that, but that's an incredible story. Castor, remind me, what regiment and infantry were you in?
I wasn't, excuse me, I wasn't in the infantry. I was in the 251st Field Artillery Battalion, Battery B.
Was that Army?
Army, yes.
Yeah.
We made, as I said, we made the landing in the Philippines, the initial landing. My job was to establish communications between the battery and the headquarters, where we got all the information on our targets we were supposed to be shooting at. Unfortunately, the radios didn't work, so everything had to be hardwired. Radios did not work in jungle-type conditions, so we used hardwire to catch all the batteries to the headquarters, and that was my job.
Did the wires often get destroyed?
Well, I don't know. We didn't pick it up after we left. We just left it.
Yeah. So, well, with the remaining time, do we have any questions from the audience? Yeah. Nice loud voice, please. And why don't you come on up and you can ask a question over the microphone.
Permission to read the letter. I'm very curious what the rest of it says.
Oh,
The question was if he has permission to read the letter. And yes, certainly. Yeah, just keep it here. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Stand up, please, and come on up forward so we can hear your question.
thank you, Mr. Cheney. You bet. All right.
Where did you get that?
First of all, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for coming here today. It is a great privilege and a great honor to see three living legends such as yourselves being here. My name is Lance Corporal Thomas Cashin. I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years. And honestly, I have a million questions I could ask. I could sit all afternoon asking you questions, and it's very emotional to sort of reach across time like this and even if you guys said nothing at all, just the fact that you're here would be just a great privilege in itself. I don't even know where to start with questions. I suppose the best way I can think of is when you were younger, did you ever have a chance to meet Civil War veterans and what they were like? I wonder.
Yes, I did.
That's a good question. Go ahead, class.
There was an organization in Norwood. I don't know if it exists any longer, but many years ago they had a Civil War group that I used to meet with, where they had on display, talking about display of the medical equipment, and then we talked about the various battles that the Civil War was involved in.
Joe, when we're talking about World War II history, is there anything in particular that you remember that really sticks out, that you want people to remember about World War II?
Probably, many people thought when it came to field artillery, which is what I was in, that the only way you might get hurt is if an incoming shell landed near you. And the reason for that was that at that time, the fuse that was on an artillery shell detonated only when it hit the ground. Consequently, the shrapnel would go up in a V style. So, the phrase came out that hit the dirt. Well, that's what you do because the shrapnel would rise in a V shape, and if you were on the ground, you were fairly safe. Well, in World War II, the Germans had the same new fuse, and it was a fuse that would detonate in midair. They calculated exactly where your location was, and that would detonate overhead. So the old theory no longer worked because when that detonated in midair, the shrapnel flew all over the place and undoubtedly would hit some of your people. When we first arrived in Germany, we got an incoming shell from the Germans with the same fuse. That detonated overhead, and we lost 3 of our men from that one shell that came in. And it was all shrapnel.
One's over to,
A friend of mine
roughly,
got shrapnel in the neck,
I guess went down one day.
killed him instantly.
About directly down the
But his friend were in the same tent. By the way, it was 6 o'clock in the evening. They were writing letters to their home, letters to their family at home. And so the 3 of them were killed. And I got a letter shortly after that from the wife of a friend of mine. And she said, there's going to be a mistake. The telegram that I got from the War Department, by the way, it wasn't called the Defense Department, it was called the War Department. The telegram that she got said that he got killed on October 5th. She wrote to me and said, got to be a mistake because I received letters dated after October 5th. Well, our mail was censored, so I couldn't give her too much in the way of details, but I could tell her that October 5th was the wrong date. It was November 5th. So at least it brought some closure to her. And I said, if I get back, she lived in New Hampshire, and I lived in Rhode Island. I said, I would love to see you, and I'll give you all the details. The family never knew what happened to them. 65 years later, I moved to New Hampshire, and I did look her up, and gave the story to the family. So 65 years later, I brought closure to that family as to what happened to their loved one. That was one of those situations, but the point I wanted to make was that the shrapnel from the incoming shells were treacherous because they could figure out pretty well where you were located. And so could we. We did the same thing. So, I
Joe,
know.
did you see the 88 cannons? It's the German 88s.
Yes, we did.
Like the one that we have outside here, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And they had a 105. At one point during the war, we captured their guns, their 105s, and their shells. And we fired their shells back at them, something like, I think it was 800 shells that we got and sent them back to them through the gun, So, I mean, the one thing about the 240 millimeter that we had, it was referred to as the largest mobile field artillery piece that we had. There weren't many in the country, but there were a few. And when we trained at Fort Bragg, we trained on the 1918 model of the 240. It had come out at the tail end of the war. It was never used in the war. They kept them, and we used it for training. And the new gun came in just before we went overseas. And that, I'll never forget that morning. The battery commander, we were supposed to know every job required to operate this gun, so that if anything happened to one, somebody else could step in. Well, this morning, this was a brand new gun. And when you had a brand new gun, you set all your sights ready to go, and you got off the gun. There were platforms where you could stay on the gun while you were firing it. But first round, you didn't do that. You got off. And they gave you a 50-foot lanyard, a cord that you pull. Well, battery commander gave us all our assignments. Mine was the lanyard. And we never fired this thing before. Well, when I pulled that gun, I thought the world had come to an end. It was terrible. And to carry this further, I needed hearing aids, and I went to the VA, and the guy says, "Well, you've got to prove that it was the war that caused it." And I said, "You've got to be kidding. Anybody who's in field artillery is going to have hearing problems later in life." And so he said, "Yeah, I guess you're right." I hope I answered your question.
Any more questions? Yes, sir. Come on up, and we'll get the microphone here. Excuse me one second, Joe, and I'll get this thing off. Yeah, you bet.
Talked to him before, yeah.
Good, good.
Hi, Jim. I just met you before, but thank you so much. So I'd like to say my father was World War II, Third Army, serving a patent, and he was armed in infantry, so infantry and tanks both. And his father, before he enlisted right after Pearl Harbor, his father enlisted in World War I as well. So I was going to go to Vietnam those 2 years. So what I want to say is that my father was in D-Day, Battle of the Bulge, right through the end, and we won the liberators at Dachau concentration camp. And we happen to be Jewish.
Hold it up close.
Oh, we happen to be Jewish, and we won the liberators at Dachau concentration camp.
Wow.
Today's the highest Jewish holiday. I was at temple last night, but I wanted to come there. I've been here before. Not before, that's right. So I want to just say that a lot of people don't know, and you guys know, but when my father and the other American soldiers liberated the camp, Dachau, they didn't know what to expect. They only heard stories, but they didn't know what to expect. But when they got close and the stench and so on, you know, they knew something really bad. So when they went in, my father spoke fluent Yiddish. I don't know if anyone knows what that is here, but it's a mostly German, Eastern European language is almost extinct now, but that's what the Jews spoke in Europe, as well as from the countries they were from, the language they spoke. So they said, we need someone to speak to the survivors. So my father was able to do it, and they thought he was the Messiah. Basically, they came, dropped to their knees, kissed his muddy boots. He had full combat gear, has 45 slum nose, and his M1, and I'm sorry, machine gun and 45. And we thought he was the Messiah. They saved him, and that kissing his muddy boots, and he was crying. They were crying to put them up and assaulted them, but the other thing I want to say, the soldiers obviously were, as you fellows mentioned, were devastated, crying and everything else. So what a lot of people don't know is I'd like to say that there is some justice in this world because in the camps, they found some SS hiding in the camps. They were wearing the inmates' uniforms. Of course, they took them all right away because they were healthy.
Yeah.
They stripped them off their shirts. And in the left armpits, they had a blood type. That's what the SS would have, the blood type on the left armpit. So what they did was the Jews that were still healthy enough, the officers looked the other way, and they handed them weapons, knives, guns, you name it. And they said, have that. So you picture someone that slaughtered your family and so forth in the most heinous ways. They just ripped them apart. And then the soldiers also did the same thing. The American soldiers, the officers just looked the other way. And so they got some good payback, and I actually got a picture of that too. And I'll say real quick that I have a Nazi dagger that my father took off, killed a Nazi with in the Battle of the Bulge, was hand-to-hand combat. And he saw his friend about to be killed by it when his Nazi. My father jumped in. My father was a pro boxer, real good one too. Got to overpower the Nazi and killed him with it, and I have that in my closet. So it's, I'm glad you guys are witnesses, because when you hear people say that the Holocaust never happened, here's 3 guys here that will tell you it did happen, and here's the pictures, and so when people say that, it's a crime when they say. And I also want to ask you guys before I leave, do you remember the Screaming Meanies? My father used to talk about the Screaming Meanies. When
Billy, you remember this
Screaming Meanies? My father said you got to a point where there was artillery, German artillery. You got to a point where you knew they were going to land. You just kind of.
Yeah, so describe a little bit about what a screaming Mimi is.
So I'm not sure the exact, I think it was the 88s, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it was the German 88s, which they had on the battlefield here. And it was a very powerful weapon and unfortunately killed a lot of soldiers, of our soldiers. But they would make a really loud noise as they were coming down, kind of like a meow. And they would rain down on the soldiers so much that they would kind of know where they were going to land. So my father said it was just they just kind of knew it was going to, where they were going to land. And also in the Battle of the Bulge, as you guys know, that it was like the worst winter in like 100 years. And our men were underfed. They had no hot food. The clothing was not adequate. The ground was frozen. It was hard to dig foxholes. And my father was in the famous Patton March, if you saw the movie Patton, where they went 100 miles with no food or hot water or hot food to relieve the unfortunate airborne division. So you guys are great, and thank you so much. Thank you.
I think at this point, if everyone could give a big round of applause for our World War II veterans. Please. It's such a treat. Makes a hair stand on the back of my neck. Thank you so much. It is a tremendous honor to have you guys here today. If you guys are comfortable maybe hanging out for a couple minutes, if anyone has questions for the guys, come on up. I'm sure Cass and Bill and the guys will be happy to show you some of their medals and pictures. Again, from all of us at the American Heritage Museum, thank you so much for coming today and sharing in this Living History event. We really appreciate it. And thanks again. My name's Hunter. Thank you again.
I just wanted to say thank you so much.